Hey listeners, it's Jim, so it must be Thursday morning for us. I'm here with Anne Frey from Betterbee. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Jim.
She's visiting with us today, and she has a wealth of information. Anne and I were chatting before we started recording about what a strange winter it's been. I think you're the one who brought that up, Anne.
Well, it's on everybody's minds when you just start to chit-chat this spring. Got to say something about this winter.
Well, I can understand that. It was a long winter for me, too. Hey, listeners, I'm Jim, too, and I come to you once a week here at Honeybee Obscura, where I try to talk about something to do with plain talk beekeeping. And today is special because Anne is here with me.
Welcome to Honeybee Obscura, brought to you by Growing Planet Media, the producers of the Beekeeping Today podcast. Join Jim 2, your guide through the complexities, the beauty, the fun, and the challenges of managing honeybees. Jim hosts fun and interesting guests who take a deep dive into the intricate world of honeybees. Whether you're a seasoned beekeeper or just getting started, get ready for some plain talk that'll delve into all things honeybees.
And from your perspective, what was up with the winter season and the bee die-off and whatever? How did that affect your bees at Betterbee?
Well, it was kind of confusing, mostly. The impulse was to say, oh, no, that was just those commercial beekeepers who went to the almonds and we're fine. And then it seemed like after a short delay that the same symptoms were showing up in our colonies in New York State and Greenwich. And it was just bees that had made it through the winter in little small clusters. And you'd think, okay, I'll beef them up with a frame of brood and a piece of a patty, a pollen patty. And that's always what would turn a little colony around in the past. And for some of them, it worked. And for others, they just kept spiraling down the drain. You know, you gave them a frame of brood, which is like 6,000 potential bees, plus all the bees clinging to that frame.
Yep.
And it didn't turn them around. And that, you know, a frame of brood plus all the bees clinging is virtually the same as a whole package of bees, right? A package is
yes,
like
it is.
10,000. So it was just stunning to see them continue to go downhill and then possibly die out, or we just decided, you know, you've amounted to nothing. We're crushing this queen and, you know, taking this equipment. Once you've tried to save them for 2 times, you know, 3 weeks later, you go back, you're saying, you're not saved. I'll give you another frame of brood and another bit of pollen patty. 3 weeks later, they still haven't turned themselves around. That's the last chance for me. It's kind of harsh and it sounds terrible if you're a hobbyist to give up on a colony, but we have to just cut it short after 2 attempts to save them and wasting the brood and bees that we put into trying to save them. It's depressing.
What percentage of your bee colonies are we talking here? Was it? How many of your colonies were afflicted?
Well, this description that I just gave was not all of the ones. A lot of them died in the fall. They had tons and tons of honey left, so it was apparent they died early. But altogether, it was 40% death. And of that 40% death, the strange not recovering with a boost was probably 10 to 15% of those bad ones. What's that? 10% of 40%? 4%.
Okay.
Yeah, in general, it was dying in the fall, which gave the symptoms that it was a classic varroa mite death. You know, small cluster, formerly giant colony, and just very, very frustrating. Strangely, one of the frustrating things on top of all the dead bees dying is that you've got all this honey to deal with that's crystallized in combs. And not enough bees to consume it and use it up in the spring.
I don't know how to pitch in with this, but I hadn't even thought about it. But it was a long winter for me for a whole list of reasons. And I had one colony that I thought was dead. I just thought they didn't make it on their own because I was not much of a beekeeper last year. But it was alive, and it was just barely alive.
Right.
And it hung on, and I thought, well, if it gets to the spring, I did what you said. I put a little pollen patty on it, and they had plenty of honey. But that colony still hasn't recovered. And you see, then I went to the bad queen routine. I must have a bad queen here,
Yeah.
And I justified why that colony was small and stayed small. But now I'm wondering if I had my own minuscule event in just one colony, but the others back in the yard, I only had about 10 hives there. The others most of those were either good to blistering. They did well.
Oh, that's good.
Except for those that died. And so, of course, I had my own 30% die off. But
I wish it was 30% here, but I know some people were way more than our rate of loss here. It was pretty stunning for us to lose that many. But I think sometimes when they get such a small cluster that they can't get, it's like a family that's never quite getting ahead. You know, they work and they work and they bring in the money, and maybe every teenager in the household has its own job, you know, and they're trying to increase, but they're always just level. You know, they never thrive, this family. And I think that the bees that came through winter, like you described your little colony, are kind of like that, you know, and that's why I always want to give them a frame of brood with workers clinging to it. And I wonder if that just wasn't enough sometimes. And in other cases, we pulled out frames of honey because it seemed like the queen had a small patch that she was trying to lay eggs in, and her pattern was dense and good and solid, but she was surrounded by solid honey all around her. So she couldn't be all she could be, if you know what I mean. So we expanded that area around the brood nest by yanking out some honey and putting in some empty combs, and it just turned them around sometimes, but sometimes they just didn't. They just kept going downhill. And I've heard other people that have talked about these winter problems mention that too, but I had not heard them discussing that when I mentioned it to David, and he goes, "That's what so-and-so said too." And I was a little bit, vindicated. I felt a little better when I heard that somebody else had seen that too. It's still a mystery to me. They say it might be widespread resistance to amitraz, which is the active ingredient in apivar. But quite a few of the colonies we lost we didn't use apivar on them. We used Formic Pro on them. I'm not trying to put down Formic Pro. I'm just saying it's still confusing because I do love Formic Pro.
yeah. And you keep saying they. They said, they did, they. Which they are you talking about? The USDA or
Yeah, there's
university?
a lot of theys. Recently, the USDA did put out an article that said they had tested a lot of samples and they detected amitraz resistance in the mites that were in those samples. And they detected high viruses of deformed wing virus and acute paralysis virus. People saying stuff, they, I was referring to people like Randy Oliver or.
Well, I know the USDA always has professional and academic opinions on this, but is any other university personnel or any other accomplished beekeepers working on this concept of what caused this die-off?
Jim, I gotta say that it seems like back the same as when we had CCD pop up, it seems like everybody was working on it during February, March, April. And then the hubbub died back. But as far as names, off the top of my head, I don't have names, but I know they were collecting bees, mites, comb, honey, everything from everywhere. They had jumped right on it, and they were collecting from commercial beekeepers, hobbyists, every different state they could. it was spearheaded by the USDA, but I know that other universities were also looking into it. I'm just waiting for those papers to come out.
Well, I'm cautiously protective when I say this, but there has to be just a degree of fatigue here. We just go through these bee die-offs all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One more year, one more die-off. All those years ago, A.I. Root said in his magazine then, that comes the spring, the mania passes.
Mm.
And it's just like before you can get this work done, whatever it was that was doing it seems to have cycled on. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I can see where it would be hard to jump on this bandwagon because the bandwagon's moving so fast.
It's true. It's like the sadness and tragedy of the very end of winter. It's all swept away with the quickness of spring and how quick the people can make increase with the ones that lived. It's just like, well, we got to move on. We got to keep working. Nothing ever stops at Betterbee, and I've been mostly working on training my new assistant and chugging on with all of our other tasks. The worries of February haven't not entered my mind until today when we started chatting.
Let's take a short break here for our sponsor, and let's talk about how you're going with this trainee and how that program's working for you.
Sure.
Did you know Betterbee carries both Lyson pollen dryers and pollen cleaners? The Lyson 30 kilogram pollen dryer lets you dry up to 66 pounds of pollen per batch, perfect for serious beekeepers. Once your pollen is dry, use the Lyson pollen cleaner to remove fine debris and leave you with clean golden granules ready for sale or storage. Some items are special order and may require extra lead time, so don't wait. Order early to make sure you get what you need. Visit betterbee.com or call 1-800-632-3379 to order your pollen handling equipment today.
So you've got some new personnel and some new initiatives going on that give you some help there?
Yeah, we've got a new helper for me in the B team, as we call it. You may have heard of the A team, but this is a B team.
Mm-hmm.
And M is my helper, and they never did bees before, but used to be in farming. And I think that helped a lot when they started in with the things that we have to do with weather, and dealing with not a creature that's growing, but, these colonies that grow. And you have certain rules in the early spring about what you want to see in a hive, and it changes. By 3 weeks later, it's changed. And you're like, yeah, at first we wanted to see at least 5 frames of bees. Now we're not happy with 5 frames of bees. We're worried if we see one that's 5 frames of bees, and we want to see 20 frames of bees plus bees in the super, so it's all changing. And that's something that a beginner may not catch on to at first. It's like you feed at first and then you stop feeding. You have a bit of comb at first, and now you're not satisfied if they've only made 1 comb in a week. It's just always going on. It's always progressing and changing. And what we were looking for before might have been simply, is this queen right? And that meaning, are there eggs? We pull up just 1 frame quick because it was cool. It was cold even. And if we saw eggs, we were satisfied, and we'd say, close that up. Now it's a little more intense, and we're looking more deeply, and we're saying, how many frames of brood altogether are there? Because we want to take a whole bunch of that brood and make some nukes, and we're going to leave that colony with 4 frames of brood, period. The end. Close it up. It's constantly changing, and depending on what your purpose is. And making nukes is a big part of what we do here. So that's why I just swung right into making nukes in my topic. I was going to chat with you about the things I've shown Em as a total beginner, though Em was thrown straight into the lake, as you say, and taught to swim just like that. Whenever I see anything unusual, in this relationship, which is basically a student and a mentor, though I work them like a dog. And you don't want to treat your students like that every time.
You know, it's got to be a lot of job satisfaction for him.
Oh yeah, sure. Getting really strong now. The I might say, oh, here's a queen cell. This queen cell, the queen emerged from, and it looks like this with a ragged circle at the bottom because the nibbling jaws of the queen bit through that, and she walked out. Look at this queen cell. It's capped at the bottom, but it's not all knobby. It's like smoothed off. This queen's going to come out any hour now, and like, look at this queen cell. It's really stumpy and wide and thick. It was last year's, and they've just kind of smoothed it over and added more wax to it. And it's just a big, like an acorn cap kind of ugliness now. And there's so many little details and clues that looking at a lot of hives, you can find to add in when you're teaching a beginner. The other day, Em said, here's a queen, I think, but it looks weird. Is this a queen? And it was a virgin queen. And I said, good eye.
Good eye.
That is a queen, but she's acting like a crazed squirrel. She's dashing around and fluttering her wings and just not acting all deliberate and searching and thoughtful like a queen usually acts. She's just sort of skittering around like a manic chipmunk. And her waist looks different. It's like her angular edges of her waist and abdomen are different than the big, plump, chubby sort of abdomen and hips that a mated queen has. So it's like all these little nuances.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love seeing that stuff and showing it to a new person.
Well, I was just listening to you talk. It's pressure on both of you, isn't it? It's pressure on you to give pertinent information, but not too much.
Not too much.
And then the student has the responsibility of maintaining a sense of hopefulness about an ever-changing environment they're working in. So what was right in February, what was right in April is not right here in June and July.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's... spring is just so fast. Everything goes so quickly in spring. And I think that's where beginners who aren't constantly with another experienced beekeeper, they can fall behind so quickly. They may have been told, fill that feeder once a week, see how they're doing, whatever that phrase means. And that's all they've been told. But to have the idea that the colony is supposed to increase steadily from, say it was a nuke, the nuke should increase steadily all the way through mid-July, probably, and then be a big booming monster for the rest of the summer. And a package will be a little behind that, but it will increase. It's like when I was a beginner, my bees didn't increase. They always just sort of struggled along and looked about the same size as when I got them. And I didn't know that was a bad thing. I just had one hive and these were bees and I watched them at the entrance and I thought everything was fine. I didn't understand the big picture.
Do you remember your early years? Do you remember? Are you able to bring back personal memories of?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was in kindergarten, Jim, I'm cursed with a good memory.
Oh, well, I was not meaning to go that far back. Not that you're that old, but just But I had a guy say one time, very interestingly, that experienced, aged beekeepers with vast knowledge didn't make good mentors for beginners because they overlooked too much. That you needed someone who'd kept bees about 4 to 5 to 6 years to mentor someone brand new, because their early beekeeper memories were still fresh.
That's a good point. I think because I actively try to think of how the beginner student feels, that I've avoided that pitfall. because I do teach a lot of beginners, and I have seen teachers who seem to forget what the beginner mindset was, and I do actively try not to teach like that. It's an easy thing to slip into, though. Like you said earlier, not saying too much, not teaching too much, and flooding a person.
Yeah, I've always thought about those bee books. I thought it might be the wrong thing to do to hand those beekeeping tomes to a beginner. Give them, the simple books with the condensed version of beekeeping, and leaving out so many of the situations that could develop. But just stay on the basic elements, rather than handing them the 600-page book and saying, "Here, read this."
Yeah, it's hard to know what to do in those cases, because if they get the very, very simple, condensed story and they never go any deeper, then they'll feel like that's the story. They'll be in kindergarten every single year of their beekeeping.
Yep.
They're always a kindergartner. So that's tough, because some people, they don't do well with books, or they think that this must be the end of what I have to learn. After they've done 1 year, they feel that's a success, and that's that, and it's the end, and that will be the same thing next year. And it's like, no, it's going to be different next year. You got comb,
And the next, the next.
And the next. I don't know why people would fall into that mindset, though, because nothing in life is the same every year or every season.
That's a perfect point to end on. Our time here is just about up. I always enjoy talking with you, and I was sitting here while you were talking, remembering my earliest years.
Good.
And thanks for the time. I know you're keeping bees, and you got all this going on, and nukes and divides and splits, and you come in on a nice day and talk to us and the listeners. Thank you.
Jim, I was glad that you chose today, because it's 87 degrees here today, which to us is deathly hot. We're such wimps in New York.
Well, open a window. And until we can talk again,
Okay.
I'll tell you bye, and I'll tell the listeners bye too.
Thanks, Jim. See ya.